right, let's dive right into it. So what are the hottest towns in Massachusetts in the last 30 days? So we're going to start off in Norwood. In Norwood, you know, the average sales price was $799,000, and the average list price was $739,000. So on average in Norwood, 8% above asking, and that was based on 24 homes. And average days on market, only 20 days on average on market. So just looking at the categories really quick, you know, a majority of the homes sold from the $600,000 to $1,499,000 range. And in that range, obviously if you see 8% above for the whole town, you're gonna see it reflected in the range. But you're talking, you know, 6% above asking, 5% over asking. But here's the two categories that really elevated it as far as over asking, and that's from $800,000 to $899,000 range. 13% above asking on average in that range, and that was based on 6 homes. So at 6 homes, 13% above was the average. So on average, if you listed it at 741, on average you were getting 840. So that's kind of crazy. That's almost $100,000 difference. So on average, so that's, you know, that's a pretty hot area right in Norwood. So the other range was right above that, from $900,000 and $999,000. It was only 2 homes, but on average those 2 homes went for 10% over asking, and then 7% for the one category above that, 1 million to 1,499,000. So you know, a lot of healthy numbers if you're looking to sell. Obviously, if you're looking to get into any of these hot towns, you're probably gonna have to pay over asking, because that's the majority of what these homes are going for. All right, who's next on the list? Let's look at Groveland. So Groveland, again, just like Norwood, 8% over asking. The average list price was $741,000. The average sales price was $799,000. It was 9 homes on the list. And just a disclaimer, usually if it's got to be like 3 or above to make the list. So if it's just a, you know, if the town only had like 1 home sold, you know, they're not going to make the hot towns list or the cold towns list when we do the cold towns, you know, in the colder months. So, but over here, average days on market, 20, just like Norwood. Like I said, 9 homes, and categories that jumped out a little bit, just to look at them, 600,000 to 699,000. It was only 3 homes in that category, but they went on average 9% over asking. So on average, you know, they were listed at 584, and they went for an average sale of 637. And then the category right above that, oh, and the days on market for there were 16, so lower than the average for the town. Then you jump right above that, 700 to 799. It's only 2 homes, but they went on average 8% above asking. So the average list price was 702, and the average sale price was 760,000. And those are only 11 days on market. And then jump up a couple other categories, 1 million to $1,499,000 range, only 2 homes, but 14 days on market, and they went on average 9% above asking. So on average, you know, 1,109,000 was the ask, and the sale was 1,213,000. All right, let's jump over to Malden. In Malden, 8% above asking, like the other 2 towns we talked about. Average sales price, $811,000, and the list price was $752,000. And on average, only 14 days on market throughout that whole town, and 14 homes this was based on. So again, like we were seeing, if you watch the other video with all of Massachusetts, we're seeing just like a little chunk, like all the homes are in this little range here. Not all the towns are in the same range, but it's just, usually when I look at these reports, it's like a wide range from like top to bottom. But I've been seeing a lot of just stacked from like certain categories to certain categories. And those are always different a little bit. For here, it's 500,000 to 1,499,000. All the homes sold were in that range, all 14 of them. And, you know, a couple categories that jumped out. Probably the one actually the most was the 600,000 to 699,000, because of those 14 homes, 5 were in that one range, and they all went on average 6% over asking. So on average there, it was listed at 611, and they sold for 645. And then the other category that jumped out with number of homes was the 1 million to $1,499,000 range. 4 of the homes were in that range, and they went on average 8% over asking. All right, let's talk about Medford. So Medford, 8% over asking. Average list price, $863,000. Average sales price, $926,000. On average, 26 days on market. So we're seeing the homes on market a little bit longer there. 21 homes, so a pretty, healthy sample size to look at for the data. Again, everything's in this one bracket, 500,000 to 1,499,000, just like the last time we just looked at. So a couple of the homes that stood out here, one home, so everything in that bracket, let me back up a second. Everything in that bracket was like 3% above, 6% above, 8% above, 7% above, 11% above. But there's one home, there's just one, so it's probably an outlier, but there was one home from the $700,000 to $799,000 range that went for 4% below asking. So it was listed at $749,000, and they ended up selling it for $717,000. But it was only one home. But the category that had the most homes there was the $1 million to $1,499,000 range. 7 of the homes were in that range, and they went on average 11% over asking in that entire range. All right, what about Danvers? What's been going on in Danvers? Well, Danvers on average for the town, 9% over asking. And the average list price was $732, and the average sales price was $796. That was based on 17 homes, and days on market, only 14. So things are moving fast, in Danvers. And one of the homes was on the market for 42 days. So if you took that one out of the equation, that 14 would be even lower. So again, just like we were seeing in the other towns for the most part, everything's chunked together from 600,000 to 1,999,000. So a little different, but still chunked together. And you're just seeing the same similar numbers there, right? 9% above, 13% above, 13% above, and even. So category to jump out, the $700,000 to $799,000 range. 5 of the homes were in that category, and they went on average 13% over asking. So on average there, they were listed at $662,000, and they sold for $745,000. And then there's just 2 other homes I was going to talk about there, and that's in the $1 million to $1,499,000 range. 2 homes are in that range, and they went on average 13% above asking as well. All right, let's move over to Ipswich. So in Ipswich, what's been going on the last 30 days? So you got 9% over asking. The average list price was $748,000. The average sales price, $818,000. Average days on market, 28. So a little bit longer on market over here. Only based on 8 homes. All right, so let's just look again, chunked together. Common, what we've been seeing, 500,000 to $1,499,000 range. Everything in that town sold there, and the couple categories jumped out. 500,000 to 599. 2 of the homes are in that range, and they went on average 11% over asking. And then from $900,000 to $999,000 range, only one home, but it went for 12% over asking. And then the $1 million to $1,499,000 range, there was 2 homes in that category, and they went on average 12% over asking. All right, let's jump over to Reading. So in Reading, the average list price was $1,011,000, and the average sales price was $1,094,000. And on average, 14 days on market, and that was based on 17 homes. Again, everything in a chunk from $700,000 to $2,499,000, all in that range. Obviously, that range goes a little, a bit higher than the other ranges, but still everything is all in that chunk, and every one of these categories had at least one home sold in that whole chunk there. But a couple categories jumped out, 1 million to 1,499,000. 5 of the homes are in that category, and they went on average 11% over asking. So average list price there was $1,117,000, and average sales price was $1,236,000. And then one other home I just wanted to mention, it's only one home, but it was in the category right above that, and they listed that home at $1,388,000, and that ended up selling for $1,650,000. So it went for 19% over asking. All right, let's jump over to Marblehead. So in Marblehead, 9% over asking. Average list price, $1,112,000. Average sales price, $1,206,000. Average days on market, 33. And that was based on 17 homes. And again, we're seeing everything in a chunk from 700,000 to 2,499,000. Everything was in that range. And everything was over asking on average in all those categories. So a couple that jumped out just to mention. I mean, they're all 5%, 7%, 8%, 5%, you know, a lot like that. So these that I'm going to mention are one-offs, but still I want to mention them just because of the percentage here. So one home was listed at $729,000, and it ended up selling for $895,000. So it went for 23% over asking. And then there was another home that was listed at $1,775,000, and it sold for $2,350,000. So it went for 32% over asking. So those were both one-offs, but still, you know, those are pretty big percentages when you're talking about, you know, what the offer is versus what it was listed for. All right, what about Cambridge? So in Cambridge, 9% above asking, the average list price, $2,564,000, and the average sales price was $2,688,000. And average days on market, 37. This was based on 15 homes. And again, we're seeing a chunk, but this chunk here in Cambridge, you know, is a little bit on the higher end as far as price points go. All the homes started at 1 million that sold in the last 30 days and go all the way up to, you know, over 9 million in that category. So just to look at the breakdown a little bit, of the 15 homes, 6 are in this one category, from 1.5 million to pretty much 2 million, 1,999,000. 6 of the homes were there, and they went on average, you know, 12 days on market, but the average list price there was $1,552,000, and the average sales price was $1,734,000. So 14% over asking based on 6 homes in that one category. And all the other categories were above asking except for one, which I'll get into, but it was 4% above, 13%, 1%. There was another home, it was just 1, but it sold for 19% above asking. So they listed that one at $2,680,000, and it sold for $3,200,000. But when you get to the $5 million to $9,999,000 range, it's only 2 homes, and they went on average 3% below asking. So I don't know if it was just one of those homes that threw that off. I'd have to dive into that. Also, the days on market in that category between the two was 202 days. So that's kind of what raised the whole town up as far as, you know, 37, you know, being the average days on market. All right, let's take a ride over to Revere. So in Revere, on average, 10% over asking. So the average list price was $593,000. The average sales price, $648,000. You know, that was based on 9 homes, and average days on market was 18. So again, we're seeing everything, you know, in a bracket, a category there from 450,000 to 799,000. So the average there, you know, you're seeing 11% above, 6%, 13%, 7%. One category jumped out a little bit. Number of homes, the most in one category was 600,000 to 699,000. Those 4 of the homes are in that category, and they went on average 13% over asking. All right, what about Lincoln? So in Lincoln, Massachusetts, because I also cover Rhode Island too. Right now we're talking about Massachusetts. 13% over asking, and average list price, $2,471,000. Average sales price, $2,800,000. So average days on market, 86. But I'll get to that in a minute. This is only based on 4 homes. But again, all clumped together. Over in Lincoln, it was 2 million to 3,999,000 was the entire range of the 4 homes. 2 of the homes were in the, you know, 2.5 million and $2,999,000 range. They went 11% over asking. But the other 2 homes, kind of what I wanted to talk about. So one home in the $2,499,000 range. A lot of numbers keep saying over and over again. Sorry about that. But that home was listed at $2,589,000, and it sold for $2,475,000. So it went for 4% below asking, but that was on the market for 307 days. So that's kind of what skewed the days on market, you know, for the whole town. So the other one I wanted to talk about was the one home that was listed at $2,595,000, and it sold for $3,500,000. So it went on average, well, I shouldn't say average, it went for 35% over asking. All right, what about Arlington? What's going on in Arlington? Not Arlington Road, Arlington, Massachusetts. Good movie, by the way, if you've never seen it. It's an oldie now, I guess, but that was a good one. So anyway, 11% over asking in Arlington, and average list price, $1,330,000. The average sales price, $1,479,000. And average days on market, only 11. So things are moving really fast in Arlington, and that was based on 30 homes. So 30 homes, and on average, only 11 days on market. That's pretty impressive as far as a hot town goes. So again, everything was bracketed together. 900,000 to 2,999,000. Everything sold in that range there. And you know, some of the numbers just 13% above, 11% above, 12%, 16%, 4%. As far as number of homes of those 30, 16 of the 30 were in the $1 million to $1,499,000 range. And they went on average 11% over asking, but 16 of them went 11% over. So pretty cool there. And then we had one that was, you know, the one right above it, $2 million to $2,499,000 range. There was 3 in that category, and they went for 16% over asking in that category. All right, what about Plainville? Let's talk about Plainville. Plainville, 12% over asking. So the average list price there, $454,000, and the average sales price, $503,000. And average days on market, only 20. It's only based on 3 homes, so the minimum to get on here, but 12% over asking, you know, they made the hot towns list. So let's talk about it a little bit. So their range was actually, everything was in that range, but a few of the categories didn't have any sales because there's only 3 homes. But everything was in the range of $300,000 to $699,000 in Plainville. So, but the average, you know, each one's a one-off, but 16% above, you know, they listed at $274, they sold it for $320. The other home was $489, they listed it, and they sold it for $540, so 10% over. And then the other home was listed at $599, and it sold for $650, so 8% above. All right, drum roll, we're on the last one. Let's get it going. So what do we got? We got Melrose. Melrose, number 1 for the hot towns list for this month, and on average, 16% over asking. Average list price, $883,000. Average sales price, $1,009,000. So average days on market, 10. Only 10 days on average. And that was based on 17 homes. So if you're looking to get into Melrose, you might want to get in line on the waiting list right now because things are just moving. You need to be ready to go if you're going to Melrose. So, and if you're looking to sell, I mean, it can't get much hotter than this. So, you know, I've never had Melrose be number 1 on the hot towns list before. Again, I only look at this in detail, you know, in the hot months. You know, I keep an eye on it during the other months, but that's when I really hone in and study it. But all the categories, again, they're all lumped together. 500,000 to 1,999,000. Everything sold in that range. And one home that went the most above asking for a single home, it was listed at $425,000, and it sold for $535,000. So it sold for 26% over asking. Then there was another category that had the most number of homes in the category. It's the $1 million to $1,499,000 range. 5 of the homes are in that category. Average list price there, $999,000. So list price wasn't even technically in that category, but the sales bumped them all into that category. $1,179,000 was the average sales price. So 19% over asking on average for those 5 homes. So pretty impressive numbers in Massachusetts. If you're looking at the selling angle, obviously the buying angle is the reverse of all this. So those are exciting too for people that want to buy. You know, I love doing the cold towns list and seeing where the, you know, you get the deals and different things that are going on. Maybe now's your time to make your move if you've kind of been planning it out. But it's also exciting, you know, if you're looking to sell your home. You know, there's always two sides to the coin here. You know, half the people are happy when it's going great with the high sales, and the other half doesn't like that. But then if it's cold, you know, it's the whole reverse. So anyway, thanks for staying tuned. I appreciate you watching my videos. If you did get a chance, check out that Massachusetts one, because that'll give you something to compare to, so you can kind of see where these line up as far as overall Massachusetts goes. All right, other than that, let's get to the summer. Summer's just about here. Time to get in the pool. We got it just about ready to rock and roll. So have a good one. See you at the next video.